Hi everybody, my name is Sierra and welcome to Forgotten Recipes. So today's recipe comes from Fannie Farmer cookbook. Let me tell you how great this cookbook is. This cookbook has obviously been through a lot. The back cover is missing. It's well loved. I love this cookbook because it has everything in it. It has things as simple as pancakes or muffins, or how to pan cook chicken, or how to boil noodles, how to use leftover meats like leftover beef or lamb, or what to do with your Thanksgiving leftovers. But then it also has recipes like duck à l'orange, or chicken cordon bleu, roast beef, different breads, pastries, desserts, vegetable side dish. I mean, it's very large. Even in the back it has measurement, conversion charts. If you were to buy one cookbook and you are still beginning, I would recommend this because it literally almost has everything that I would need. But this one is very old. It is the 12th edition, which was printed in 1979. So a couple years before my time. So obviously this was handed down to me, but it has been a very, very good addition to my cookbook library. So today's recipe is kind of a recipe to start getting in the mood for fall. I have an apple tree in back, which is so great, but it also means every year I have hundreds and hundreds of apples. And every year I make a ton of apple bread, a ton of applesauce, a bunch of apple strudels, a couple of apple pies, and it's getting kind of boring making the same thing over and over. So I thought I would try a new one. So today's recipe is an apple Pandowdy. It's basically a pineapple upside down cake with apple. I've never tried it before, but I love pineapple upside down cake, and apples in cake is never a bad thing. It also had molasses, which is delicious with apples. Now usually with baking I'm not so loosey-goosey with my ingredients, like, oh, I'll just add a little more of this or a little more of this. With baking it's a little more scientific. There's a little more chemistry involved. But in this recipe, molasses is used more like a spice or a herb or a seasoning, to where you can use a little more or a little less than the recipe calls for, and you don't have to worry about completely ruining your cake. So let's get started. Now here's the ingredients you'll need. Salt, apples, molasses, ground or whole nutmeg, cinnamon, milk, flour, baking powder, sugar, 1 egg, and butter. First, let's start by peeling, coring, and slicing the apples. Have a bowl of water handy to put the apples in once they are peeled. Sprinkle some fruit fresh in the water, or you can use lemon juice. They both prevent browning, and it also works with potatoes. I'm using an apple coring machine. If you don't have one, you can use a vegetable peeler and a knife and thinly slice the apples instead of using rings. Having an apple tree and hundreds of apples to peel each year, this is definitely a necessity for me. Now once your apples are done, preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Grease an 8x8 baking dish. You can use cooking spray, but I prefer butter. Take a clean paper towel and about 1 tablespoon of butter. Whether using butter or cooking spray, make sure that all the corners are completely coated. Now layer your apple slices on the bottom of the baking dish. The recipe calls for 3 cups of sliced apples. I only used about half of that. Once you're satisfied with your apple layering, evenly sprinkle 1/2 teaspoon nutmeg over the apples. I'm using whole nutmeg, so I will be using a microplane. Next, do the same with 1/2 teaspoon cinnamon, a spice that I clearly use a lot. I added a dash more to fill in some spots I had missed the first time around. Next, sprinkle 3/4 teaspoon salt. And drizzle 2/3 cup molasses over the apples. I only used about 2 tablespoons. We're not huge molasses fans, but I still wanted to be able to taste the molasses on the apples. When measuring sticky things like molasses or honey, spray the inside of your measuring cup with cooking spray, and it helps them slide out easily. Now cover the baking dish with aluminum foil and bake for 30 minutes. Now let's start with the cake dough. Combine your dry ingredients in a bowl. That's 1 1/2 cups flour, 2 teaspoons baking powder, and 1/2 cup sugar, and set aside. Now heat a small saucepan over medium heat. Add 1/4 pound butter. Break it up and stir the butter until it's completely melted. Make sure there are no butter lumps left. Turn off the stove and remove your pot from heat. Add 1/2 cup milk while stirring the butter. Add 1 slightly beaten egg. As to not turn out with scrambled eggs, make sure you stir constantly while adding the egg. Combine the wet ingredients with the dry ingredients using a spatula to scrape the sides and the bottom of the bowl, making sure that all the dry ingredients are fully incorporated. Once your apples are done, carefully remove the foil. There's a lot of hot steam trapped in there, so careful! Pour the batter over the apples, spreading it evenly to ensure it all cooks evenly. Return it to the oven for another 30 minutes. Once it's done, let your cake stand for about 5 minutes before flipping it over. Even though the baking dish is well greased, I still run a knife around the edge just in case something's stuck. Now it's flippin' time. Place your serving dish over the baking dish. Never ever flip your cake over the serving dish. You will get cake everywhere. Flipping them together ensures your cake will land relatively where you want it to. Oh, look at all that molassesy goodness. Right before serving, you can sprinkle some powdered sugar on the top for a nice little sweet decoration. And there you go. The cake is super moist. The apples are really tender. They're falling apart. They're nice and sweet with the molasses. Just make sure you use tart apples to combat the sweetness of the molasses, and it is a wonderful fall dish. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week while we make our next forgotten recipe.